Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us in IBFIM's 11th webinar series. I am Rus Shadwati, your moderator for this session. First, allow me to make a few announcements. The format of our session will commence with a presentation by our speaker and followed by Q&A with participants. If you have any questions for the speaker, please type it in the Q&A box and inshallah they will be addressed at the end. The topic for today is the new norm for Sharia assurance, issues and challenges. The new norm resulting from the COVID-19 outbreak calls for the readiness of Sharia-based organizations in mobilizing the organs and functions of Sharia governance in ensuring Sharia compliance. In addition, the recent Sharia governance policy document issued by Bank Negara Malaysia that came into effect on 1st April 2020 highlights the accountability of the board and Sharia committee on the effective implementation of Sharia governance. We have with us today Professor Dr. Zurina Shafii to discuss on how the organs and functions need to strategize and mobilize people and processes in order to address the issues ensued. To briefly introduce our speaker, she is a professor in Islamic finance at the Faculty of Economics and Muamalat, University Science Islam Malaysia, USIM, and a research fellow at USIM's Islamic Finance and Wealth Management Institute. Currently, Professor Dr. Zurina Shafii is a member of the Sharia Committee at Standard Chartered Sadiq Malaysia Berhad. Her academic and professional qualifications include a PhD in Islamic Finance from Durham University, United Kingdom, and the ACCA Professional Level Certificate. She is also a certified Islamic financial planner. With this, I pass the session over to Professor Dr. Zurina Shafii. Please welcome, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much, Rose, for the introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. First, I would like to thank committed IBFIM team for giving me the opportunity to present and engage with you on this topic. This is a very dear topic to me. On Sharia assurance, but today I'll be sharing on issues and challenges post the outbreak of COVID, which introduced the new norm for all of us. Okay, so let's first revisit or remind ourselves on what are the values of Sharia governance to institutions, to Sharia-based institutions. Of course, it is the backbone of Islamic banking and takaful industry and other Sharia-based institutions. Because, without Sharia governance and Sharia assurance, there is no way that institution could ensure Sharia is being implemented as promised by the management to the shareholders, to the customers, and to other stakeholders, and to users as well. And because of that assurance and governance, it introduced or it provides the legitimacy for Islamic practices. And I shall brief later the type of industry that operates according to Sharia principles, which are diverse in the practice of Malaysia, because we have Islamic financial institutions, we have Islamic cooperatives, and we have the avenue for investors to invest in Sharia compliant way. So the Sharia governance and assurance really ensure Sharia governance and thus provide the legitimacy of the operation of these institutions. And the good thing is that Sharia governance matters to the performance of whatever institution that are adopting Islamic practices, and it in the long shot, it it will boost the confidence of shareholders, investors, and customers, as I mentioned just now. But in terms of the performance that we could measure, Sharia governance improves the financial performance of organizations. There are a few research that has been conducted of late that reveal that evidence. And more importantly, we shall be focusing as well on the non-financial performance with the realization of the industry on the value-based intermediation, with the need for the Sharia-based institution to achieve maqasid Sharia. Sharia governance organs and functions are the parties that ticks all the boxes, that provides the values to the shareholders and stakeholders, and ensure that non-financial performance of these institutions are also being achieved. And for the last defense, the Sharia governance and assurance manage risk of non-compliance of the organization. And we have this provision in IFSA 2013, as well as in as guided in SGPD 2019 as well, that there are heavy penalty for organs of Sharia governance if they intentionally conduct the activities of non-compliance. So because the regulator would like to ensure that the gain and trust of the stakeholders are being taken care of. So the introduction of guidelines to the organs and functions are important in order for them to be able to address the risk management of the organization. Okay, this is what I've mentioned. Sharia-based institutions, if you only focus on Islamic financial institutions, then we only have 16 Islamic bank, 15 takaful operators, and 6 development financial institutions in Malaysia. But Sharia compliant operation in Malaysia is more than Islamic financial institutions operation. We have nearly 800. At one time it's 900 or 800 companies that are listed on Bursa Malaysia that is Sharia compliant, that are Sharia compliant, which provides the avenue for investment by the institutional investors and retail investors to invest in a Sharia compliant way. And we have also Islamic real estate investment trust and exchange traded funds that operate according to Sharia principles. So this is where Sharia governance and assurance are important, so that the customer's confidence are not breached. And in addition, to address the need of the mass market, we have Sharia cooperatives, Sharia-based cooperatives that offer Islamic financing to the members of the cooperatives, and we have public trust entities as well that basically promise us that will operate according to the Sharia principles, where we have Tabung Haji, we have KWSP with IEPF schemes. Those really attacks or attracts or require the Sharia governance and assurance functions to be maintained within the organization. And last but not least, we have the state establishment or state of Islamic religious councils that provides the zakat collection and distribution services to the public, to the one in need, and wakaf management, as well as Baitul Mal management, which also has to be governed properly, and has to be ensured on its conformant to the requirement accordingly. For instance, if we have when we have wakaf projects or wakaf initiatives, we know that wakaf has to the capital has to be intact, and only the return is to be distributed. So Sharia governance and assurance is important to ensure that property, for instance. Okay, so This, you could say this is the Sharia governance and assurance enablers. We say it's enablers because they are the important parties that ensures that are the backbone of the Sharia-based institutions. So this term was introduced by Sharia Governance Framework in 2010, the first Sharia Governance Framework, which states that the organ of Sharia governance are three. First is the board of directors. Secondly is the Sharia committee and the senior management. These organs of Sharia governance are the main parties that, for instance, board. It establishes, it provides the strategic policy for the senior management or top management to address accordingly, and then that policy to be adopted at the operational level. So board is basically the brain of the organization, and Sharia committee, the role is to advise, and not only advise but to monitor. To monitor on the Sharia compliance of the organization, on whether the management and the operation are taking whatever approvals and guidance by the Sharia committee and other Sharia guidelines within into the operation. So first is to advise, second is to monitor. So that's why we have the function of Sharia review and Sharia audit, where Sharia committee is responsible to plan, monitor, and responsible to look into the results or the findings by the Sharia review and Sharia audit exercise. So that's why basically Sharia committee is approving the plan for Sharia review exercise in Islamic financial institutions. And in addition to Sharia review and audit, we have Sharia risk management and Sharia secretariat and Sharia research that are assisting the Sharia committee and other organs of Sharia governance to work effectively. Okay, so when we are talking about the functions and organs of Sharia governance, it's important to look into the basic principle in assurance. So here is the three lines of defense model that was introduced by Institute of Internal Auditors back in 2013, but of course it's still relevant, and it is implemented in many industries. The manufacturing industries adopt this, and halal industries, production industries are also adopting this, and the same with Islamic financial institutions. This is basically the fundamental model which we tweak a little bit to embrace Sharia compliance. So the lines of defense, for the first line of defense, the business unit and operation are guided by the management control and internal control measure in order to be able to deliver work in a correct manner at the first time. Means that Sharia compliance has to be delivered by the frontliners, by the people in operation first time around. So any non-compliance has to be put as a negative note to the KPI. That is what the spirit of the new Sharia governance policy document, where the remuneration package has to take into account the Sharia governance and assurance mechanism as well. Okay, so that is the first line of defense, where the business unit, people in the operation, has to do to perform the transaction correctly at the first time. And then we have second line of defense in case where the business unit and operation having the khilaf during their work, and then Sharia review within the compliance function will perform the end-to-end review, so that if there any gap in observing the Sharia, now Sharia review officer could advise, could report to the Sharia committee and advise and in turn advise the management on measures to improve, on measures to mitigate that non-compliance. And for third line of defense, we have internal audit. In specific, we have Sharia audit within the internal audit function, which this time around Sharia auditor provide independent independent assurance on the state of compliance of the auditee, because for Sharia review, it's still reporting to the management, but now Sharia audit is reporting to the audit committee. You could you could see the arrow that the report is now escalated to the audit committee. So now it's not the time to say it's not the time for the management to say, I'm sorry, we have some gaps and all, but now the finding is escalated to audit committee, which will communicate to board of directors. So the stake is high when it comes to the Sharia audit findings. So people take audit quite seriously for that matter. So that is third line of defense. And those are the internal lines of defense within the organization. And of course, we have external functions as well that assist Sharia-based institution to deliver Sharia compliance, which are external audit. Now we have um, 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 more comprehensive function of external audit, which includes Sharia audit as well. As DPD also mentioned that external audit could include Sharia audit exercise. So that's why we are having initiatives to empower external auditors to be able to perform Sharia audit exercise as well within our CPSE program. And a regulator, of course, will do as a watchdog, they will do compliance audit and compliance visit and so on to the institution. Okay, just a little bit of mention on the uh, new revision of Sharia governance framework, which is now called Sharia governance policy document, that guide the industry further on the role of board, Sharia committee, and senior management. Remember that these three functions or these three parties are the Sharia governance organ, the core organs of the Sharia-based institutions. Board now is responsible for the Sharia implementation. That's why board has to understand the Sharia methodology, the methodology of Sharia committee arriving to its decision, and board has to also, step up their game in terms of understanding for Sharia. So much engagement now is being done between the board and Sharia committee. Part C of STPD looks into Sharia committee role and responsibility and the conduct of the meeting of Sharia committee. So now the guidance are given quite a little bit more detailed guidance are given on the conduct of meeting of Sharia committee. And we have certain measure to improve independence of Sharia committee, where a Sharia committee cannot serve an institution for more than 9 years for the Sharia committee to be able to maintain the independence of advising and monitoring the Islamic financial institution. Senior management, the focus was on the learning on the Sharia knowledge, as well as now the senior management has to be seriously responsible on the enhancement or communicating the creating the Sharia compliance culture within the organization. And part E, with regards to control function, Sharia review, Sharia audit, and Sharia risk are now control functions, and Sharia research will be within the Sharia secretariat function to provide assistance to the Sharia committee. Now control functions three instead of four that was mentioned in Sharia governance framework previously. And we have part F that mentioned about the Sharia compliance culture, on the importance of it, that Sharia governance and Sharia assurance shouldn't be focused on the Sharia. It's not Sharia committee's responsibility only and board responsibility only, but it's really has to be owned by every body within the organization. So that's why trainings now is being escalated, is being uh, uh, to really internalize the Sharia practices. Okay, and part G is on transparency and disclosure, where the observation of Sharia committee members has to be transparent and properly discussed in the annual report. Okay, now we look into the what are the changes of the Sharia governance organs and functions practices post crisis, where we have now limited access to documents, to access of facilities in the workplace. So now this transformation model says that we have past ways of doing work, how we used to work, and then now we are coming at the phase of crisis where we are embracing we are in the survival mode in order to deliver our job, because you are appointed as Sharia reviewer and Sharia auditor, but now because you cannot access the data in the field, it's not that you are not Sharia auditor anymore. So you have to really deliver your function even with the limitations. So we are doing the best that we can in order to perform our job function. So we adapt. So when we adapt means that we embrace new technology, we embrace new ways of performing our work. Instead of going to the field, now we adapt that the auditee now is providing the data via secure emails, or if organization that is ready in terms of technology probably have their data put into the database and so on, that's okay. But for the organization that are not yet ready in terms of that, they have to adapt in many ways. Okay, and then when we are successful to adapt, then we transform, and hopefully in a better way, because not necessarily sometimes we have to be at the location to audit, and this will save costs, will save the environment, will reduce the pollution and so on. Okay, these are the factors or dimension that leads to the effectiveness of Sharia assurance. There are some research that say these are the factors that that increase the effectiveness of Sharia assurance. For instance, knowledge, experience, skills, training, professional care, and with the crisis that are facing by us right now, we have to rethink, we have to adapt and transform in terms of how to be able to score on the dimension and ensure effectiveness of Sharia assurance, but in situation of limitation. For instance, skills. Previously, audit skill and review skill, centered around auditing skill and compliance skill. But now the knowledge on the technical aspects of digital audit is to be embraced by the Sharia auditor and Sharia reviewer. So now the skill set is being broadened to include more elements in order for effectiveness Sharia assurance or Sharia audit. Okay. Okay, these are adoptable strategies in order to adopt and transform. We could promote or we could practice interactive and adaptive learning. We could engage multiple enablers, means that now communication is not one way. We as Sharia reviewer at one time probably focus communication with the reviewee or auditor with the auditee, but now because of the use of the technology, now the enablers are more diverse, because we need the assistance from IT, we need more interaction with head of departments and so on. So engagement are now multiple prong rather than a straight way communication. And knowledge sharing and peer-to-peer learning are now being adoptable, as well as I mentioned, in order to adapt, we have to be thinking of new ways of doing things. We know that we have the objective to ensure Sharia compliance, end-to-end Sharia compliance for Sharia review. Now the objective has to be achieved, but then the ways for us to achieve that has to be new ways, innovative ways has to be created in order to deliver that objective. Okay, I would like to share in a little bit of my experience. Now it's been 2 months that we don't have a field meeting. And then not the normal ways of doing business for us Sharia committee members. So there are changes of ways of Sharia audit, Sharia review, and Sharia risk are doing their job. For Sharia risk, now we know that the main risk that are posed by the crisis is in terms of infrastructure and business continuity management. When I say infrastructure is first is on the accessibility of staff in getting the relevant document when working from home. It's good if the document is at headquarters. You could still go from time to time to headquarters, but it's even worse if the document is at various branches of the bank. So that introduce risk to the operation. And Sharia risk also are having issues to monitor its risk control self-assessment exercise, because again the limited access to documents, and the validation by the employees are also difficult to be obtained, because of the restricted movement. So in terms of business continuity management, so when we think about business continuity management, we always focus on the effect of natural disaster. Means that operational risk from fire, from loss of data, and so on. But then now we have a new type of risk, which is health pandemic risk that that for us to respond, because like I mentioned just now, when we would like to do review or audit, we need to be getting the data from database, or we need to be getting data from the auditing. And now the issue of security of data transfer is an issue in business continuity management. And of course, when we do meeting sessions, when we work from home, that also is an issue where it could be hacked or anything. If it's a high level discussion, for instance, for institutions that are thinking about new product development, if it's hacked, the secret will be out to the other institutions, for instance. For Sharia review and Sharia audit, as the exercise for both are being planned for the year to 2020, where the Board Audit Committee has already approved the plan. Now with the restricted movement control, the plan has to be revised to include, because now the review will focus more on the review of the transactions rather than going into the manuals and procedures, because probably the manual and procedures was reviewed in the previous exercise. Now the focus, because of the limited time that we have, because we probably lost 1.5 months of replanning, and then the review and audit now is focused on the audit and review of transactions only, which is okay, because we consider the risk, the risk element within it. If we could reduce the population of the audit or review, then and we take into account the relevant risk of doing that, then it's okay, because now we are adopting risk-based approach to review and audit. Okay. And okay, I from the 2 months post crisis, or from the month of March, when we have the restricted movement control. We During the engagement with the practitioners and the Sharia functions within my organization, these are the factors that or challenges that they feel that are important to be addressed if we would like to be successful, to be to transform into new ways of doing ensuring Sharia governance and assurance. First is the tone from top. It's very important to have the top management, in terms of board and top management, that really support, really empower the audit and review heads, for instance, to be able to readjust and rethink about their deliverables. Yeah. So in terms of readiness, I mentioned just now that we have infrastructure issue, and probably some organizations are lacking in terms of having a proper system, proper database or platform, which provides the digitalization of the documents and so on. So that is a challenge. And working from home is a challenge by itself. It's difficult to balance or to focus on works on work matter during working from home session, and even this has been recognized by CEO of PMB, when it says that work from home now is a permanent option for PMB staff, that he understands that there will be some abuse, but he's taking the stand from the bigger picture that probably effectiveness could be ensured when employees are more happy and having more time to focus on their own on a certain job. Yeah. Okay. Digital data management. This is part of the system. When we have digital data management, then only is possible to do a digital review or digital audit. Other than that, we have to really wait until the period of crisis ends before we could do review and audit, which is not really a feasible option. So yeah, it's probably now is the high time that we realize on the importance of digital data management. Um, that's all from me. That I've shared all the changes that I've encountered. I've picked up from the organs and functions of Sharia governance for you, the audience. So back to Rose.
Thank you for the presentation, Prof. Zurina. In the interest of time, we will have about 15 minutes of Q&A. We already have some questions here in the Q&A box. If there are more, please type it down for me to read out. The first question comes from Muhammad Faris. He asks, as a job seeker and stakeholder, how to know the non-public listed company, such as SME business, is Sharia compliance? What
Okay,
is the
okay.
implication if we are working with non-Sharia business? Is it permissible or prohibited?
Okay, thank you, Faris, for your question. It's a public uh, the information on the status on the compliance of the company it's available in the public domain. The list, if you're talking about the listed company on Bursa, Bursa publish the list 2 times in a year. So it's a biannual assessment on the company which are compliant and which are not. But if you're talking about SME, and then probably you have to do your own assessment based on the criteria on Sharia compliance that are stated by Bursa Malaysia, because Bursa Malaysia has its own methodology on how to decide whether the company is Sharia compliant or not. For instance, the main activity of the business cannot be riba based, gharar based, and then operate in clear Sharia non-compliant sector, for instance. So probably you could do your own assessment for SME, and have somebody to help as well. Um, so yeah, if you're talking about whether it's permissible, on your second question, whether it is permissible to work in Sharia non-compliant organization, yeah, there are several calls to this. Some are quite strict, but when we say employment, then we are getting salary from the employment itself, rather than on the specific activity of the organization. So that's why some say that it's okay to be working in a non-compliant operation, for instance, a conventional bank, because like myself, is if I'm an auditor, then the function that I'm doing is I'm auditing the organization. So that is the service that I'm giving. So that's what I meant, Faris.
Okay.
Do we have
The
next
next
question?
yes. The next question comes from Encik Safwan, where he asks, pursuant to the Sharia audit effectiveness, there are actually no clear guideline by BNM on how to perform Sharia audit, um, in which there is dispute between Sharia review and Sharia audit. When they presented the findings to the Sharia Audit Committee. Prof, what is your comment on this concern?
Okay, Safwan, thank you very much for your question. Yeah, I agree. It's spot on. There is no guidelines on how to, in detail, perform Sharia audit, because in the framework it mentions about, the objective of review and audit, and the steps. The best that the regulator has provided to us is on the processes on how we do Sharia review and audit. But in practice, what we do is we take into account, we adapt into IIA guideline, internal audit guidelines, to so to give us a more detailed guidance on how we do the Sharia audit, especially because IAA is concerned with internal audit exercise. With Sharia review, this is also an issue that is been it's been brewing sometime in the industry, where some functions or some um, um, enablers of the Sharia governance cannot distinguish between the function of Sharia review and Sharia audit. Furthermore, now the approach is Sharia is risk-based. Both are risk-based. Both are taking sampling for their job, for their data, and then but the Sharia review, uh, if you would like to focus on the differences, I mentioned just now that Sharia review is at the second line of defense operation, and Sharia audit, because auditors are really independent to operation, then it provides independent assurance. So in terms of where they are in the three lines of defense model, and then in terms of Sharia audit, it focuses more on ensuring the internal control, and Sharia review focuses more on looking into the end-to-end Sharia compliance. With they deal more on the documents, and then on the process and procedures. And of course, transactions are also reviewed, but then we look into the transactions without looking much into effectiveness or adequacy of internal control. But audit really focuses on that. It looks into the adequacy of the internal control first and foremost. Yeah, Safwan?
Okay. The next question is from Amira Husna, where she asks, does the remuneration paid to the Sharia Committee affect the independency of SC, which is the Sharia Committee, in making decision?
Okay, good question, Amira Husna. Um, to answer that question, um, the remuneration, whether the remuneration impact the independence. If we look into other, functions as well, board directors are remunerated for their functions, and board of directors really are independent of the management as well, because board of directors has to has to provide check and balance to management, and management or the organization is paying for the board of directors. I mean, that is, from the corporate governance point of view, what we call argument. So the same with Sharia Committee. Sharia Committee advise the institutions. So to say, if the Sharia Committee is not independent, I think what Bank Negara is doing right now, the initiative of Bank Negara is good. Now that Bank Negara or the regulator is strictly monitoring the minutes of meeting of Sharia Committee, to look into, whether the Sharia Committee are being pressured to approve something that he or she doesn't really want, because now the meeting is conducted in a way that we focus on majority decision. But if I do not agree to that decision, a special note has to be taken by the secretariat that I didn't agree on that. And when it is escalated to the regulator, and then the regulator is notified on that, that I do not succumb to the pressure. I mean, if that is the case. So yeah, Bank Negara really take that matter seriously, with that, I think, new regime of monitoring as well. Yeah. So remuneration wise, it's a practice where board also are remunerated, but in terms of practice, it is further enhanced for the Sharia Committee to be more independent now.
Okay, thank you, Prof. We have three more questions.
Carers,
First, from Azima, what are the problems in achieving Sharia compliance in Islamic finance?
the problem on achieving Sharia compliance.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. This is coming from a Sharia committee member. Of course, the problem will not come from Sharia committee member, right? Okay. Joke aside, I think the problem is, one of the challenge is that it's quite challenging to educate everybody, all the players in the Sharia-based institution, to understand the governance and to get the adequate level of Sharia knowledge. So I know training has to be done, but then sometimes training are done, like 2 days a year for staff in Islamic finance institution, or in cooperatives. So that basically is, arguably not enough because of the complexity of the operation, and the risk that attracts that operation. So yeah, it's difficult to get everybody to be appreciating the culture of Sharia compliance. So I think that's why, again, it got a special mention in SDPD, that now everybody has to internalize the Sharia compliance culture, and to be able to internalize, trainings on Sharia has to be further, I think, enhanced, to be taken more seriously by the players. Especially, in Islamic financial institutions, I think the situation is not that grave, because it's been specified by the regulator. But think about other industry that I mentioned. just now. Other Sharia-based institution, for instance, in cooperative, where the offering of Islamic financing is quite recent. So most of the processes and procedures are taken out or copy pasted from other institutions, and the staff do not really understand on the crux of the matter. So really the adoption is quite non-comprehensive in terms of Sharia assurance and Sharia compliance within organizations or institution other than Islamic Bank. That is my observation.
Okay, the next question comes from Muhammad Fauzi Rahmat. He asked, where do you think is potentially the most likely source of Sharia risk that could possibly take place in a typical banking institution with a new norm situation?
Within new normal situation. Okay,
Yes.
not only the Sharia risk, or very good question, Fauzi, for me. Okay, in the new norm, so what is the possible, the highest possible risk that we could have in Islamic financial institution? Non-compliant risk of Sharia non-compliant. Okay, I could say now, because of the exercise of review and audit is now being adjusted to is now being replanned. Probably there is risk that whatever activities or whatever transactions that has been performed by the frontliners are not able to be captured by the Sharia review and Sharia audit, because of the as I mentioned just now, that we probably reduce on the sampling, and we probably look into the transactions and not on the policies and procedures. That is one risk that I could think of, because the exercise of Sharia review and audit is really affected during this period, because business continuity management do not really cater for both exercise. And the risk, if you were to ask me the question on what is the highest risk, I mean, the all-time risk for in Sharia-based operation is always the risk of that happen within the interaction between the frontliners and the users. Okay, in term of the engagement, in term of akad, in term of using the correct documentation and so on. And in addition, of course, even that is correct. We have also system risk, where sometimes system cannot cater, the section that we have done. But that is, a remote exercise or remote transaction. Okay, Rose, do we have next question?
Um, we have a lot of people posting questions, but I'm
Okay,
afraid we don't have enough time to answer them all. But I
okay,
will read out the last question from Miss Nazatu Sharina, which
okay.
is, what is your view on governance during this MCO?
Yeah, the governance during this MCO uh, has to realign, has to be realigned to adopt to the new norms, because the assurance and governance has to take place, without without fail. Like I said, review has to take place, audit has to take place, but the measure or how we're gonna achieve to that assessment of total compliance, end-to-end compliance, and for audit is the independent assurance. How that is taking place has to be adapted, has to be innovated. How we're going to achieve that. So yeah, I mean, although we have challenges, but I think if learning from the lesson from COVID now that we really need to establish digital data management for us to be able to conduct digital review and audit. Now I think we learn to appreciate that more than in the past. So I think in the future, organization will really think about feature more and how it will facilitate and how it will ensure that no glitch will happen again if we have difficult access to physical documents. Yeah, that's
Okay.
and the answer to Nazatul.
Okay, I believe that is all the time we have for questions. Thank you so much to everyone for your high participation in this webinar series. The remaining questions that wasn't answered will be answered in our social media, including IFIM's YouTube channel.
Okay,
Again, thank you very much, Prof. Zurina, for all
you're
the knowledge
welcome.
with us. This presentation will also be uploaded on IPFIM's YouTube channel. So don't forget to click subscribe and share with your colleagues and friends that may have missed these sessions. All participants will be sent a feedback link, and we appreciate your feedback for us to continuously improve our webinars and bring more new content for you. So, before I end this session, there is an announcement of our next webinar series entitled Introduction to Civil Court System in Malaysia by Dr. Muhammad Johandi on the 20th May 2020, which is next week. Registration details will be posted on our social media pages. So, once again, thank you all. Assalamualaikum and hope to see you in our next webinar.